Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Kier, and joining me, as always, is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's season 2, episode 19. Today we are just 1 week away from the Steelers' first preseason game against the New York Giants. Before we get that preview episode in, we wanted to talk a little bit about something that we thought would be kind of unique. So we'll be taking a little look into the fantasy football preview for the Pittsburgh Steelers and a little bit of a look at the rest of the league. We wanted to kind of evaluate the Steelers players on the roster and sort of give our 2 cents on their value in fantasy and on what we think their value in fantasy football will be this year. But starting out, we're going to get to some quick NFL and Steelers news. So some quick hitting news. I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, Ryan Tannehill suffered a non-contact injury to his left knee. For those who don't remember, he partially tore his ACL last season at the end of the year and missed the last, I believe, 2 or 3 games, including the playoff loss to the Steelers. Matt Moore started that game, and he's apparently re-injured that knee. So the team is seeking a second opinion right now, or at least as I had known earlier today. You were saying here, Austin, that he's pretty much has the choice between season-ending surgery and sitting out 6 to 8 weeks with rehab and hoping that it heals correctly, which that's also not really a guarantee. So this is quite a big blow to the Dolphins, regardless.
Oh yeah, it's really a shame since the Dolphins were really the only team that even had a chance of beating the Patriots in the division, regardless of how small it was. Losing Tannehill almost ensures that the Patriots go 6-0 in their division, barring any injuries. The injuries that happened during the season, my bad. While Tannehill is the greatest quarterback, he's still better than backup Matt Moore, as he is the starter for a reason.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think the Dolphins with Tannehill were somewhere. Apologies. The Dolphins were somewhere between an 8 and 10 win team. I believe they won 10 games last year. Without Tannehill, I think they'd be lucky to get to 9 wins, maybe even lucky to get to 8. Now there are reports out there that Adam Gase is trying to lure Jay Cutler out of retirement to come to the Dolphins. I don't know if you saw that, Austin.
That I did.
What are your thoughts?
I don't think Jay Cutler is the move. I think Matt Moore. I'm pretty sure we said this at the end of season 1 that Matt Moore was a decent backup quarterback, probably one of the best backup quarterbacks. I don't think there's much improvement there. I don't think Jay Cutler is going to be any different. He's still Jay Cutler. I think it's just best to stick with Matt Moore and maybe pick up another cheaper quarterback just for more depth. What do you think of him trying to call Jay Cutler?
I don't think Jay Cutler. I know the numbers indicate that Adam Gase has the numbers that Cutler has put up under Adam Gase's offenses have been the best of his career, but I don't think that the Miami offense really makes sense for Jay Cutler right now because of the personnel they have as well. Jay Cutler's more of a deep ball thrower, and I don't think they really have any of those burners, do they?
Maybe Devontae Parker. I think Devontae Parker is supposed to be fast, and Kenny Stills, but Kenny Stills is the Sammy Coates of the Dolphins. So
Yeah, I'm not really that high on him either. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, Moore is definitely a backup. He's not a bad player to have for sure. To be completely honest with you, I think I'd rather have Colin Kaepernick than I'd have rather have as opposed to Jay Cutler. To be completely honest with you,
I think so too.
that's another thing we should talk about is what's going on with the Ravens. Their organization looks really bad right now.
It's so bad. It's just been. I don't even know what the real news is. It's been like saying, "Oh, Ozzie Newsome is the one reason why Kaepernick isn't coming here." Then they said he came out and said, "No, it's not the reason. There's other things." And I haven't gotten the full stories because every story's been different. It's been like Harbaugh wants him, and then Newsome's denying that, making sure it doesn't happen, and then Newsome's like, "No, yeah, we'd be open to it," and they're talking, but they're not talking. The situation with the Ravens is confusing. And it's probably just hurting their rep and bringing them bad attention, like every team doesn't want when signing Kaepernick. And this is the issue right here, because it's just bringing on drama.
But it's not even that. They just did it to themselves.
Yeah.
There's nothing good from what they've done. They sought out Ray Lewis for advice on this. What's Ray Lewis going to tell you? Why does he need to be included in this?
They didn't cut Ray Lewis when he was accused of murder, did they? I feel like they should have just signed Kaepernick and got it over with. They're causing more drama than needs to be.
The simple fact of the matter for me right now, if I'm the Ravens, is Colin Kaepernick going to be a better quarterback on your team than A, Ryan Mallett, and B, Dustin Vaughn, who are your other two quarterbacks? I think that's a pretty easy yes, if you ask me. And I think the whole media circus controversy thing is useless at this point because of what they've already done. So if I'm the Ravens, I just pull the trigger and sign him. Might as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Ryan Mallett is really bad, so...
Yeah, it's funny. I remember hearing a few years ago that this NFL reporter was thought he was looking at Tom Brady throw the ball, and he was talking about how nice the throws looked, and yeah, it was on the sideline, but he was like, wow, this guy looked like such an imposing figure, and it turned out to be Ryan Mallett. And he was like, I think that guy's going to be something good, and then, well, the rest of his career happened, but I always thought it was interesting that he didn't really become what everyone thought he could have been. And I also wonder if that's what could happen with Jimmy Garoppolo, too. Two different players, but go ahead.
It's if they leave the Patriots. Once they leave the Patriots, they're no longer good. Matt Castle, 11-5 with the Patriots. Leaves the Patriots a 2-14 season with the Kansas City Chiefs. Then is he even with the Vikings anymore? I don't know.
Well, I will say this. Castle was a Pro Bowl quarterback with the Chiefs in 2010.
Oh, he was really?
27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 2010 led them to the playoffs.
Wow.
Now
okay.
the rest of his years were not nearly as good, so
I pushed that out of my head. I guess I didn't remember that at all.
Granted, it was 7 years ago, and of his entire NFL career, he's had 2 good years. The one with the Patriots, where he earned that starting job with the Chiefs, and then his second year with the Chiefs. But yeah, he's mostly been bad. It's funny, we talk about how players end up being bad when they leave the Patriots. It's funny talking about how all the players who leave the Bills end up being good.
It's true. Oh my God, there's so many of them.
Yeah, that's a topic for another day, though. We got sidetracked, so let's get back on track here. Corey Davis, the last unsigned first-round pick of the Tennessee Titans, signed his rookie deal. So now that all the first-round draft picks have been signed, we've had a little time since the draft to think about our early season predictions for Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year awards. Who are your picks? Start with the offense.
I'm going to stick with the last man signed is going to be Corey Davis. With the help of a breakout year from Marcus Mariota, of course. I think the Titans are in for a big year this year, and a big reason is going to be that Mariota to Davis connection. Who do you have as the Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I didn't really have a ton of reason for making this pick. I forgot how many defensive players went in the first round. So I actually went with Dalvin Cook, and it's out of the matter of I like him better than the other 2 running backs. Not in the sense that I think he's going to be a better player than Leonard Fournette when their careers are said and done, but I personally think Christian McCaffrey's a little overrated. And on top of that, I also believe that the Jaguars and Leonard Fournette that doesn't excite me either. I know that there really isn't much going on with the Vikings on offense, but I know that they have a pretty good defense, and I don't know. I saw him play a lot. Being a Pitt fan, I saw him play in the ACC a lot, and I really liked what I saw from him last year. So moving on to the defensive side of the ball, who did you have, Austin?
You already know who I'm going with. I'm going with Takkarist McKinley. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, everyone knew my pre-draft love for Takkarist McKinley and how badly I wanted him to be there for when the Steelers picked. Well, I'm going to stick to my guns, and what I saw in his tape is that he's going to be a star, enough to win defensive Rookie of the Year. Wow. Who do you have as your Defensive Rookie of the Year?
before I get to this, did you get a chance to watch the Hall of Fame game?
I did not. I watched some highlights of Blaine Gabbert throwing darts, but that's about it.
Yeah, that was nice. Um, there wasn't much going on, but I did get to see a little bit of Hassan Reddick and Taco Charlton, and that was interesting to see.
How did they do, both of them?
I didn't get a great look at Reddick because I was doing some work at the time, but I remember watching a few plays. I think it was the first scoring drive for the Cardinals, so it might have actually been the opening drive. Charlton got washed out on a couple of running plays to the outside, so I think he still has some room to grow. So that being said, I definitely don't think he's winning the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. And I actually went really outside the box here. And the logic might be somewhat flawed here, but I think Jamal Adams is going to have a fantastic year. Jamal Adams, the safety of the New York Jets. Here's the thing about the Jets. They're not a good football team at all. But the best part of their team is their defensive front, which means they're probably going to have success stopping the run against other teams. So that means they're going to be throwing the ball a lot, and that means getting beat over the top is something that might happen to Adams this year, but I also think he's going to have a lot of chances to pick off a lot of passes, and we saw things like that happen with guys like is it Jarris Bird or Jarius Bird? I think it's Jarris Bird when he was with the Bills. He had something like 9 interceptions, I think, his rookie year. So it's not out of the question to get something like that. That doesn't mean I think he's going to be the best defensive rookie, but I think he's going to have the most eye-popping stats for a safety compared to the other positions. So that's why I think he could win that award. Next bit of news we have is that Jaguars tackle Brandon Albert just recently announced his retirement. Also a sudden retirement. The Jaguars just picked him up in a trade, I believe. Correct?
Yeah, traded for him with Julius Thomas and a 7th-round pick.
So it was essentially that's a pretty big loss for the Jaguars. What do you have to take away from all this?
I really feel bad for them. Luckily, they're getting the 7th-round pick back. I mean, it's not the worst pick to lose, but I mean, it's just like every time they try to do something right and it looks right, it still turns out wrong. Well, Jaguars Julius Thomas isn't the ultimate loss either. There was once a great Julius Thomas in Denver, and maybe without getting injured, that Julius Thomas can return in Miami. So it still sucks to lose a tight end. I don't know. I can't actually even name their starting tight end right now.
Well,
it might be Mercedes.
I was going to say, is he still around?
I have no clue. I guess that's who's doing it, but I'm not sure. What do you think?
I don't know if that's very good. Are you sure Julius Thomas? Are you sure by this point that Julius Thomas wasn't a product of that great number 18 quarterback?
I think it could have been, but I mean, he still had hands when he was there, so.
That's true. It's at least 50% of the battle. It's throwing it and catching it.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the Albert retirement, I'm pretty interested to see if this was done in response to that CTE study where what's his name Urschel of the Baltimore Ravens just recently retired. By the way, the Ravens just signed an offensive lineman. I forget his name. I think his name is Howard.
Oh yeah, Austin Howard from the Oakland Raiders.
That's good that they were able to pick someone else up. They lost another lineman, their I think 4th-round draft pick Nico Siragusa to a season-ending injury. So that team's decimated and they haven't even played a game yet. So off topic again, but I'd be interested to see if Albert decided to retire like partially in response to that or if he had already been considering it. And then just a little fun note I have for myself. Brandon Albert's actually from the Rochester area, which is where I've grown up and where I am right now. And I believe his cousin, he's one of his family members. I don't know if it's his cousin, but his cousin or whatever, his name was Ashton Broyld, and he won the New York State Player of the Year his junior year in high school. He played in a high school that was 10 minutes from where I went to school, and we had the misfortune of playing him several times, and he went on to be the leading receiver on the Syracuse Orange. I believe it was 2013 or 2014. He never amounted to much after that, but it was just something interesting with the pedigree in that family that I wanted to mention. So moving on from that, getting into some Steelers news, the big Steelers news today Mike Tomlin, Steelers head coach, agreed to a contract extension to keep him around through the 2020 season. What are your thoughts on this?
It's good. He's the top 3 or 4 coach in the NFL, so he deserves it. Come on, the man has never had a losing record. That's incredible. It's good for him. I'm glad to have him. And just to be honest, regardless of when the Steelers lose a game, the fans are like, fire Haley and fire Tomlin. It's just, I really enjoy him as a coach on the fun side. I always wondered when I was younger why teams didn't go for 2 points more, because I thought it was exciting and made football exciting. And even though it wasn't that successful last year as it was 2 years ago, I really enjoy that Mike Tomlin's one of the different coaches that tends to go for 2 points more. It makes the game more exciting.
And jumping on top of that, I really think that the Steelers are better positioned to be a lot more successful with that next year, since they'll be having a full complement of receivers this year and hopefully a better red zone target when you factor in Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that the Steelers have the opportunity to do what Mike Tomlin has been wanting the Steelers to do for the last few years, and it's a pretty ingenious attempt. And honestly, the Steelers started the year going for 2. They did it well until that Dallas game when they went 0 for 4, and then they just struggled with it the rest of the year. But I think they just need to keep going in practicing that. But yeah, it's easy to point out Tomlin's flaws because his in-game decisions haven't always been the sharpest, especially when it comes to time management. But the fact of the matter is, he is one of the best. He's one of the best in the business. He's averaged 10 wins a season after 10 years in the NFL. That speaks for itself. He has the highest winning percentage of any coach in Steelers history. He's the fastest Steelers coach to reach 100 wins. He's the 6th longest tenured coach, and he's still I think he's like the 5th longest tenured coach. I think it's like Mike McCarthy, Marvin Lewis, Bill Belichick. I think I'm missing Sean Payton, and then it's like him. And he's still the 6th youngest coach in the NFL on top of all of that. So he's a fantastic coach. And I think about his flaws and how much worse it could be though. Marvin Lewis is considered maybe a top 10 coach, maybe, or at least a top half coach, right? I mean, league wide. Come on.
I guess.
I mean, I know it's crazy he's gotten some of these extensions, but he still took a team to the playoffs 5 years in a row, a team that historically has been, garbage.
Yeah, I guess I could keep him definitely in the top half.
Because we both probably think he's overrated, which I do, but I think league-wide he had been seen as a pretty popular choice because of what he had done with the Bengals over that half-decade span. But the fact of the matter is they still never won a playoff game with him, and Mike Tomlin is a far superior coach to him, and he's considered a average to above average coach. So I'll take the problems with Mike Tomlin that we have. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, maybe I don't know how much you remember of Bill Cowher being the Steelers head coach back in the early to mid 2000s, but would you say that Mike Tomlin is a better coach than Bill Cowher, or is it still kind of on the fence right now? Are you leaning a certain way?
That's a hard one. I mean, a lot of people's complaints about Mike Tomlin or argument for the other way is that Mike Tomlin was left with a winning team. But at this point, it is now to the point where this team is his own. He doesn't even have his first draft pick anymore. His sweetheart, I'll call it, Lawrence Timmons, if I remember correctly. So this team is almost completely new and his own, besides a few pieces like James Harrison and Ben Roethlisberger. But I gotta give it to Mike Tomlin. I'm gonna go Mike Tomlin. I really think he has potential to be better. But
right now though.
Okay, I'll give it to Bill Cowher. Because
by the slimmest of margins, right?
It's so hard because if Mike Tomlin can somehow beat the Patriots this year, if this is another Steelers Super Bowl year, I think it's Tomlin time. Even getting to the AFC Championship, I think might be just enough. I don't know if it's there yet, but it just might be enough. What do you think?
It's very, very close. I think it's safe to say that if the Steelers can keep winning through where Mike Tomlin's contract is set to expire now, yeah, I think he'll get extended beyond this. But like, if once we get to the end of the 2020 season, I think we'll be able to say that he is a better coach than Bill Cowher, and that's no slight to Bill Cowher. Bill Cowher was probably the most popular coach in team history. No offense to Chuck Noll, it's just that Bill Cowher is from Pittsburgh. Uh, his high school team I think played like 10 miles from where Three Rivers Stadium was. He was a Pittsburgh kid. He was a tough, hard-nosed kind of player when he played in the NFL, and he wasn't a superstar. He was a linebackers kind of guy, and that's the way his team played kind of reflected himself, and I think a lot of people like that. It's so tough. You're absolutely right. It's really strange because each coach had their flaws, but it's kind of like it's almost like Tomlin's flaws were like Cowher's strengths and vice versa. But the one thing about the history of Bill Cowher that is pretty interesting is that until the Steelers won Super Bowl 40 in 2005, Cowher's Steelers had never won a road playoff game. So from 1992 to 2004, they had never won a road playoff game. And granted, they made the playoffs 92 through 96 and 2001, 2002, 2004. So that's a substantial amount of years that they didn't win a road playoff game. And then at home, they lost several AFC championship games, twice to the Patriots, once to the Broncos, once to the Chargers. So, yes, that's a lot, but that's also a lot of games where they were favored in, a lot of games where they probably should have won those games, and they fell flat in those games. Now, granted, it all ended well for Cowher getting that elusive Super Bowl win. He has another Super Bowl appearance, countless AFC championship and playoff appearances. And then you look at Tomlin, and he's had some playoff disappointments, but I think most of his disappointments have come against those sub 500 teams on the road. And he already matched the Cowher total as far as Super Bowl appearances and wins in just 3 years or 4 years. But I really hate the argument that he won with Cowher's players. Like, sure, he won with some of them, but that was his team at that point. Bill Cowher's last year, the Steelers finished 8-8. That wasn't a playoff team. I don't know. I think that's a dumb argument, and they're both fantastic coaches. But I think at the end of the day, right now I'm going to give a very slight edge to Bill Cowher. But at the end of this contract, like you said, if it takes that one win over that signature win over the Patriots, I think it's pretty easy that Mike Tomlin would assert himself over Bill Cowher in that argument. And on top of that, he's never had a losing season. So I think that's the other important thing to consider. So now that we've talked about that at length, the next issue that outside of Le'Veon Bell is probably the biggest, or actually, it's probably still the most important absence, and that is Martavis Bryant. He still hasn't practiced at training camp, and today was the practice under the lights. Was that at St. Vincent? Is it the high school, I believe?
I actually don't know. I'm not sure which practice facility was at today.
In any case, it sounds like he tried to practice with the team, but they wouldn't let him. He still hasn't been cleared, but it sounds like, although it's not official from any league statement, but it sounds like he'll be reinstated within a couple of days. So with all that being said, are you really worried? Because I was before hearing that, but I'm not really worried anymore.
No. From everything I've heard, this is the league's and Goodell's fault that it's taken too long. Martavis is practicing inside with ball machines, as far as I've heard, because he wants to be doing something. And from Ben talking about their talk together about how they want to have a I guess not a heart-to-heart, just a man-to-man talk, I know this isn't Brian's fault. It's just annoying that the league isn't hurrying up. It doesn't sound like they're on top of things and stuff. So,
where have we heard that before? The league has been slow to do stuff.
I mean, they're taking a long time with the Ezekiel Elliott situation, too. It would be just easier if they just said, nah, he's not suspended, or yes, he is. They do it often.
They did the same thing with Bell and LeGarrette Blount back when their suspensions were handed down over a year after the incident. Oh, okay. That's another issue for another day we could talk about. We haven't even gotten to the fantasy football stuff yet, so let's we should move this along a little faster. So the first padded practices have come and gone. There's a few key injuries that have happened. Some of these guys have recovered and have started practicing. Other guys haven't. So that includes James Conner, who injured his shoulder. I believe it was a sprained AC joint. He was wearing a sling for a few days after practice. Vince Williams got nicked up. I know Mike Mitchell had an ankle injury. Scott Orndorff didn't finish practice with soft tissue injuries and was eventually waived. Senquez Golson made his first career training camp practice tackle, and then 20 minutes later left the practice field once again. That poor guy can't catch a break.
No.
Juju Smith-Schuster was also injured, I believe, in the first day of camp, but has since returned. Other guys that struggled, I think the first day there were several heat-related I guess it was heat-related. I don't even want to call it injuries, but like fatigue where guys couldn't finish practice. One that was a little concerning was Xavier Grimble because that happened to him twice last year, and I think there was another one. I think it might have been Steven Johnson. I can't remember, but
the other one's to be heat fatigued. Keon Jones was one of them.
Keon Jones?
Keon Adams.
There you go. I thought that's what you meant.
Yeah.
But in any case, with all these injuries flaring up and not much to talk about in Steelers camp, a narrative has been coming across because Ben Roethlisberger brought this up last year that the Steelers have been practicing too hard, been too physical. The Steelers are pretty notorious for having pretty tough and physical training camps. Is this something you think that is a concern, or do you think it's just something that happens at the beginning of training camp?
No, I think this is normal. I really do. I mean, I'm just happy looking over at the Ravens training camp and seeing what's happening over there, that everyone's, like, slowly getting injured. But I think this happens in almost every camp. It's football. It's a physical game. People are going to get hurt to practice. You got to hit each other. I mean, I also, looking at another AFC North division, it could be worse, where linebacker Vontaze Burfict is going for the knees of a already injured in the knees, Jeremy Hill, and practice. That's not happening. These are just normal injuries that are just occur. What do you think?
I'm in complete agreement. You know, this is football. When guys start hitting each other at full speed, pretty much for the first time since, for most of these guys going back to January, some guys aren't going to be quite ready. You can train all you want, but until you finally get hit for the first time, you're really not there yet. And it's true the Steelers do run a pretty physical camp, but I also think that can be beneficial on its own end. Regarding James Conner specifically, which is why I think this whole thing blew up, I'm a little worried that he may have become too lean. I see pictures of him now compared to where he was at Pittsburgh, and I think he may have slimmed down a little too much. I think he's trying to follow the mold of one Le'Veon Bell. When he was drafted from Michigan State in the second round in 2013, he was, I want to say it was something like 244 pounds, and you could tell he was kind of slow his first season. He only it was something like 800 yards. Granted, he missed a couple games due to injury, but he wasn't as fast then as he was even in 2014 or as he is now. So I think Conner may have tried to follow suit, but that might not be something he's talented enough to kind of make up for, because it seems like he may have lost some of his ruggedness and he may have picked up some speed, but could he have lost the ability to absorb hits as well? I mean, he's been injured pretty much the whole time since OTAs. I don't even think he participated in OTAs.
I don't think so.
So that's something else to consider too. But that just about wraps it up for the Steelers news and notes that we wanted to get to. So now we can finally get on to what we wanted to talk about. The Steelers fantasy football preview. We're going to go over brief position overview. So we're going to cover the offensive positions, excluding offensive line, obviously, and then we're going to go full defense and then kickers. So starting with the position outlook, let's look at the Steelers quarterback. So mainly, this is Ben Roethlisberger. I don't imagine you or I are seeing Landry Jones or Josh Dobbs in this equation.
I don't think so. But it really hurts to say it, but it almost always seems that Roethlisberger's fantasy stats aren't the same as his real life stats. Even when the Steelers had the best offense in the league a few years back, or it might have been 2, I'm a little bit tired. He was still just an average fantasy quarterback, and that's how he's always been, a middle-tier fantasy quarterback. And part of the reason for that is because it's almost iconic. It's almost part of him that he's going to be gone for 1 or 2 games every year. He never gets a season-ending injury, but he always gets something that's going to knock him out for 4 games. And please do not pick up Landry Jones or Josh Dobbs if he ever goes down. It's just not a good idea. Move on to someone else. Use your other quarterback. It is never a good idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement. The fact of the matter is he's been a pretty average, at best above average fantasy quarterback, with the exception of 2014, which is the year I think you were talking about. He threw for just under 5,000 yards and 32 touchdowns that year. Yeah, 32 isn't a ton when you look at some guys who are throwing around 40, but I think this year he's actually a kind of a sleeper because of all the offensive options the Steelers are hopefully going to have this year. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 5,000 yards, but I think if he can stay upright, which there's reason to believe he's going to be pretty healthy this year, that along with all the weapons he has, I think this is the year that he could potentially throw for 35, maybe 40 touchdowns if he wants. The big thing is how he plays on the road, which we can get to that again at another time. But I think if you're looking at a position that's underrated, Roethlisberger's an underrated quarterback. And yes, Austin, definitely do not pick up a Steelers backup quarterback. I'm just going to leave it at that. So moving on to running back, kind of top heavy here. It's pretty similar, don't you think, Austin?
Oh yeah, Le'Veon Bell should be the number 1 or 2 pick in fantasy drafts. The dude is a fantasy monster who shows no slowing down, especially in PPR leagues. Just a little warning, all my talking is going to be in the idea that we're talking about a PPR league, so just for a future reference. But also, if Le'Veon Bell goes down, I just want to share a story. The past 2 years, while Le'Veon Bell has been suspended or injured, I've picked up DeAngelo Williams, and DeAngelo Williams did amazing when Bell wasn't playing. He did fantastic. I started in week 1 against the Redskins last year, and it won me the game. So if Le'Veon Bell goes down, I would be, unlike the quarterback scenario, I might just, if you have the roster room, just pick up James Conner, because the offensive line is still nice, and it might be worth it just in case Le'Veon Bell goes down or somehow gets suspended again. Just keep that in mind. What do you think?
Now, I've heard that if Bell goes down with an injury, especially with the way Connor hasn't been practicing, the Steelers have considered they've considered reaching out to DeAngelo Williams if that is to happen.
Well,
what would you think about that?
I like it because DeAngelo Williams still did pretty good with us when he was playing the past 2 years instead of Bell.
I honestly would have been fine if they kept him, this year too.
Mm-hmm. I think he could still play, but it's a shame.
I mean, just 2 years ago, he was tied for the league lead in rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff.
And he didn't even start in, I think it was 4 or 5 games, because that was when Bell came back from suspension and was playing really well before he got injured.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, as far as starting running backs go, Le'Veon Bell is, in my opinion, the best fantasy football starter at running back, certainly in PPR. I mean, geez, you look at all of his stats from last year before you even take into account all of the catches he had last year. And then even if he has only 70 catches this year, that's still crazy. Assuming he plays a lot and doesn't get hurt, I would be very wary of picking up a Steelers backup, but keep your eyes peeled for an injury, or if he is on that injury report, I'd be sure to keep a Steelers backup close to in close grasps. But we've seen it with DeAngelo Williams, a much more proven backup than someone like James Conner or Niall Davis. He doesn't touch the ball when Bell is healthy, no matter how good Williams has been, So I'd stay away from Bell's backups. Moving on to the wide receiver position, it's kind of a similar story, at least at the top, isn't it?
Yeah, Antonio should be either the first or second wide receiver taken off the board. Only competitor is probably Odell Beckham, but with Martavis Bryant back, you would think it would hurt his value, but quite frankly, it should help open him up more. Speaking of Martavis is going to be a fantastic late round pick that most non-Steelers fans won't recognize. So keep him in mind later in your drafts. Other than that, no other receivers should be picked up. Had Juju Smith-Schuster not been picked up, Eli Rogers would have been a sleeper as well. But sadly, he's going to be losing some reps since he's going to be splitting some time with Smith-Schuster. What do you think?
Yeah, Antonio Brown is at worst a top 3 receiver in this league. So he's easily one of the top options at that position. Beyond that, I think Martavis Bryant could be somewhere between 60 and 80 catches, easily over 1,000 yards with his average yards per catch. And something that he always did when he was playing for the Steelers was scoring. He scored a lot of touchdowns in some of the. I think he's played like 20-something games. I think he scored like 17 touchdowns, something like that. So he gets into the end zone. So that's something you definitely want. What were you gonna say?
I just was saying that's insane. There's a reason why he's hanging up behind me in my bedroom with a diamond picture.
You want to look up the official stats? Because I know it was like originally it was like 14 touchdowns in 17 games. It may have gone down a little bit, but I know he also scored a touchdown in the last game he played in too, which was that wild card win over the Bengals back in 2016.
That's the picture on my wall.
That was a great catch.
In 2015, he had 50 receptions for 765 yards. That's an average of 15.3 yards per catch, and he had 6 touchdowns. 8 in 2014.
How many in 2015?
6 in 2015, 8 in 2014.
So that's 14 receiving touchdowns in 2 years. How many rushing touchdowns did he have?
Rushing, let's see. It does not say here. Hold on.
Because I know he had one against the Seahawks.
Oh, you're right. Hold on. I'm trying to get it up from Pro Football Reference.
Okay. Well, yeah. What I want you to get is like his official touchdown count compared to the amount of games he's played.
He has 1 rushing touchdown from 2015.
Okay, so he's scored 15 touchdowns in 2 seasons. Does that include the playoffs? No, it doesn't. Does it?
It does. It's the full.
It does?
Oh no. Oh, sorry. No.
He caught. All right. He scored. He caught that touchdown against the Bengals in 2015. He also caught a touchdown in the wild card game against the Ravens in 2014. So that's 2 more touchdowns in 3 more playoff games.
Yep. He's solid. He gets a lot of touchdowns.
So do we have the totals for like games and touchdowns?
It says for playoffs, receiving and rushing is 2 touchdowns in total, both receiving and rushing, and it's the 2 you said.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. All right, so essentially he's getting into the end zone not every game, but just about. So he's someone that you really want to get. Outside of that, yeah, exactly what you said. I wouldn't want to draft Eli Rogers or Juju Smith-Schuster, but keep an eye on the snaps and how they're being divided. Smith-Schuster might be someone you want to pick up on the waiver wire at some point this year. But monitor that situation closely. Moving on to the tight end position, Austin, this is not a very strong group at all.
Oh, it is not at all. Jesse James' ceiling is probably about 45 catches and maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. It is not looking good. You probably shouldn't even pick him up. He's not worth drafting. I don't think he's even worth picking up in free agency. But, I mean, I guess that could change if it's really thin, if people are keeping keeping 3 tight ends each. I guess that's maybe a decent one to pick up. But at that point, I mean, you could probably find someone else. But what do you think?
I was just thinking off the top of my head, Jesse James was essentially the Steelers' de facto number 1 tight end last year. He caught 3 touchdowns last year. Grimble had 2 and Green had 1. So that's 6 touchdowns from the tight end unit last year. And Grimble and James should both be better, but we already know this is the weakest position, probably on the whole team, certainly the offense. And James is a decent guy, but he's, I think you have it just about perfectly. He's probably going to catch 4 to 5 touchdown passes this year. There's no reason for anyone to draft a Steelers tight end unless you're in like a 14-team league, and even then he should be your backup, not your starter. So I really don't see a need to draft one this year unless if for some reason Xavier Grimble becomes what we thought Ladarius Green was going to be, or for some reason, Ben Roethlisberger just decides, this I'm going to throw to this 6'7" guy a lot more. So we'll see. Moving on, next we have defense and special teams. This is kind of a difficult one to answer because in some leagues the scoring is different. Like I know in one league they never had like negative points. It was kind of like you started with 0 points and then you just kind of worked your way up depending on what happened. And then there are other leagues like ESPN where you start with 10 points and then you can get negative points. So it's kind of strange in how you can grade this.
It's the defense really has a chance. I feel like the defense has a chance to lead the league in interceptions this year. That's just how I feel. It like you said, it's an odd position to cover because of how different leagues use scoring. It's really weird, but I think interceptions usually count the most in most leagues. Obviously, it's usually the biggest thing. Interceptions and pick sixes. I don't know. I'm just feeling after the first half of the season, Artie Burns started getting interceptions, and I felt like Ryan Shazier at the end, before the AFC Championship game, had 4 games with interceptions in a row. It's just I feel good about this young Steelers defense.
I definitely feel better about the secondary. I'm still worried about the pass rush a ton, and Keith Butler has said time and time again, which is true, this is how it should be, is that the Steelers want to get consistent pressure with 4 guys rushing the passer. And I don't know if that's realistic because the Steelers basically were bashing their head against the wall for the first 5, 6, 7 games, just constantly just rushing 4 players, and they weren't getting home. I think they had, until Cameron Hayward had that 3-sack game against the Chiefs in Week 4, the Steelers had 1 sack through the first 3 weeks of the year, and I remember that sack in Week 2. That was not a pressure sack. That was a Andy Dalton was scrambling around the pocket and kind of tripped and fell before the line of scrimmage. That's what that was. So the Steelers were getting no pressure at all. Do I think it's going to be that bad this year? No, of course not. But at the same point, I'm still worried that the pass rush is going to lag behind, which means less mistake-prone plays by opposing quarterbacks, which means less interceptions, and less interceptions, less sacks. I'm worried that at least early on the Steelers' defense isn't going to produce where we hope it's going to. Now, I hope I'm wrong, but I think this is a middle of the pack, hopefully by the end of the year, top 10 unit. Moving on to the kicker, the final position we have to evaluate is Chris Boswell, and there's no other kicker on the roster at this moment, I believe, and if there is, there's really no reason to expect he'll make the team barring injury, so this is the only guy we have to look at.
Yeah, Boswell has been consistently solid. He finished in the top 10 in my league last year. This is another position where points scored is very different in each league. There's a lot of negative point differences and positive point differences for how long field goals are, but in my league he was top 10. So he should definitely be picked up, especially when he had 2 games with the 6 field goals last year. So I think he's a valid option. What do you think?
Yeah, this is again an interesting position to evaluate because there are some leagues where all field goals are 3 points, all extra points are 1 point, and then there are some, including a missed field goal is no negative points, and then there are other leagues where missed field goals are negative points depending on how far away the kick is. You get more points if it's a 40-yard field goal, a 50-yard field goal. So it's all over the place. But Chris Boswell is one of the better kickers in the NFL. He's reliable. He's pretty much automatic inside 45 yards. I think he's one of the better options you could pick up. And you like to think he'll be having a lot of opportunities to kick the ball with how good the Steelers' offense will be this year. So hopefully, at least, anyways. So he's not he's not going to be the top kicker, but he's one of the better ones too. So now we can get into some interesting debate topics. Austin, you want to lead with these?
Yeah, sure. The first question I arose because I was just thinking about it. Who is the better fantasy pickup on the Steelers, Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell?
This is very tough for me because a couple of years ago, it was my first year in a PPR league, and I had no business I was in the championship game. This was week 15 of the 2015 season. The Steelers were playing the Broncos, who ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. And I had no business being in this championship game. I had several guys who had scored like 1 or 2 points. And then Brown goes out there, catches 15 passes, 2 touchdowns, and puts up 56 on his own. And all of a sudden, I was back in the game. I lost on a very dumb play. I'm still salty about it to this day. I can tell you about it later, Austin. But in any case, Brown is a guy that's pretty much guaranteed at the minimum, assuming he stays healthy, 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns. But I think the thing that puts Bell over the top is his versatility as someone who can catch the ball. If Bell is healthy, I think it's a minimum of 60 plus receptions, and that kind of production is just something that can't be matched even by someone as good as Brown. And then really, when you think about it, who's getting more touches per game? Brown is at best getting 15 a game. Bell's getting around 30 a game. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. In the main league I do, I've been lucky enough to have them both the past 3 years in a row, and there are serious arguments for both. This year, however, I will have to say Le'Veon Bell, and it's probably only because I'm a risk taker. I like the idea of risk, and it usually pays off for me. But Antonio Brown is still a great pickup because he's been consistently the best wide receiver in fantasy the past 3 years in a row now. And what's even better is that he's been consistent and has hardly gotten hurt in that time, which is the main argument against Bell. While I think Bell will have a more fantasy productive season, taking him as a risk with his history of not playing all 16 games. Bell is yet to be able to play all 16 games in the season due to injury as well as suspensions, while Brown has played all 16 regular season games since 2014. I apologize. That's 3 years in a row, with the exception being last season, Week 17, where he wasn't injured, but the Steelers were resting him for playoffs. But fantasy is usually over by Week 16 anyway, so I count it as he played all 3 fantasy years every single week. But back to why Bell is the pick. Well, Bell's going to destroy in PPR leagues. His 75 receptions last year were the second most on the team after Brown, and he still had so many rushing yards after. While missing 3 games, he still snuck into the top 5 fantasy running backs by points scored. In my league, I also do a points per rush league, so to be fair, he had a little bit more oomph to get there, but he would have less by the end of the year, sorry. So imagine if he had played those 3 games, he would have probably been number 1 or 2. And that being said, he will probably be fighting for that same spot this year. I believe Bell will lead running backs in points scored this year, making him the player that should be picked either first and second or all leagues. But yeah, so that's my piece. I think you got to go Bell here. Moving on, though, do you think there are any sleepers on the Steelers?
Well, I'm going to pick one anyways, just for the sake of picking one. And I already talked a little bit about this earlier, but I think if you want to talk a sleeper on the offense, I'm going to go with Ben Roethlisberger. We already said it. He's never been a top fantasy quarterback, save for like 1 year a few years ago in 2014. These are usually the top fantasy quarterbacks you guys that you hear about a lot, or guys you will hear about this year. Guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, Phillip Rivers, all these kind of guys. And I think Roethlisberger finally has the weapons he should have at all times, the way he did in the last 2 seasons. And I think we could see him approach his 2014 numbers where he was just under 5,000 yards passing, and I think he could surpass 32 touchdowns. That would be a steal of some sorts considering the type of production, and that would allow you to still have a pretty high-tier starting quarterback on your fantasy football team, and it would allow you to address other positions early. If we're talking other sleepers that someone you could pick up during the season instead of the draft, I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster. I think the Steelers are going to love his production in the red zone. I think he's someone that could be a difference maker down there. I think he scores 6 touchdowns by the end of the season, but that's just me. On the other hand, what do you think, Austin?
I'm going to say the defense. The defense is poised to have a great year with guys like Cameron Hayward coming back from injury, and Bud Dupree going to be starting from week 1. Not to mention all the sophomore defensive players returning with more experience. And I don't think people are really expecting it. I predict them to finish in the top 5 fantasy defenses this year for fellow individual defensive player, fellow IDP players. That was a weird sentence to say. Ryan Shazier is just looking to continue to be amazing. He had an interception in 4 of his last 5 games, as I said, and should continue to be a constant disruption. So look out for him if you're an IDP player. Moving right along, are there any fantasy busts on the Steelers?
Right now, I'm going to go with James Conner, and I'm picking him because, yes, I know he's a great player and a great story, but that doesn't translate to success, especially in your first year when you haven't been on the field much at all during practices. The way things are going, if Bell goes down right now, I think the likelihood of Connor getting out of the preseason as the de facto number two is less and less likely. I think the Steelers are starting to lean more towards Niall Davis and Fitzgerald Toussaint as potentially both making the roster, with one of them being the primary backup for now. So I'd stay away from Connor this year. What do you think, Austin?
It may be tempting to take rookie Juju Smith-Schuster as he was drafted to be a red zone threat, but I'm saying don't fall for that. Eli Rogers will be taking most of his reps from at least the beginning of the year, splitting both of their reps. So do not draft either of them, as they will not be as productive in fantasy as they will be in real life. So we're going to move on to the NFL fantasy outlook. So we're going to cover more broadly in the NFL. And we're basically just going to go position by position on how we think the 2017 season is going to play out points-wise for every position. So we're going to start with quarterbacks. So who are your top 5 fantasy quarterbacks for 2017?
Actually, can you give me yours first?
Sure, no problem. I'm going to go number 1 is probably the greatest of all time, sadly. I hate saying that, but it's Tom Brady. Then after him is going to be Aaron Rodgers. 3 is Drew Brees. 4 is Derek Carr. And I think 5 is going to be the most surprising here. It's Phillip Rivers. I think Phillip Rivers is going to sling it this year. I think this is the year Keenan Allen doesn't get injured, so he has decent wide receivers the whole year. I think he's going to finish really well. So who are your top 5?
I don't hate Phillip Rivers at number 5. I actually think that's a pretty good top 5 you have right here.
Mm-hmm.
I have Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, and Derek Carr. And I know Cam Newton's the kind of surprising one there, but I just remember how effective he can be on the ground and how often he can score touchdowns on the ground. I think he's someone that you have to have in your top 5, at least in my opinion. So go ahead and continue.
I gotcha. So now we're going to go on to running backs. So who are your top 5 running backs for 2017?
Number 1, I have Le'Veon Bell, followed by Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, LaShawn McCoy, and yes, Todd Gurley. And I know that's going to surprise people, but he really struggled a bit last year, but Todd Gurley, I don't know, I really like the way he runs, and I like to think that this is going to be a big bounce back year for him.
My list is sort of similar for the top 3. I mean, it's pretty much the same. I got Le'Veon Bell number 1, but then I flipped these two because I was factoring in the points per reception. I think David Johnson is the better receiving running back. I think that's going to help him. Then number 3, we go to Ezekiel Elliott with that Cowboys offensive line. This is where we kind of change it out. I put Jay Ajayi. Last year, I really doubted him. After his one big game, I had this buddy in fantasy who was talking about, I'm like, Jay Ajayi is trash, and he had one good game. This was at the Bills. The next week, he had a 200-yard game against the Bills, might I mention. The next week, he was at the Steelers. I was like, listen, watch what's going to happen when he plays the Steelers. And you know what happened? I ate my words, and he put up 200 more yards in 2 weeks in a row. And it really hurt me. But then I was at that point in where I watched him for the rest of the season that Jay Ajayi was great. Jay Ajayi is a great fantasy running back. And then after that, number 5, I have Melvin Gordon on the Chargers. So who are your top 5 wide receivers moving right along?
Alrighty. So number 1, I have Antonio Brown for the simple fact that I'd be shocked if he catches anything less than 115 passes. He's going to get plenty of chances to score, and we already know he's a dynamic receiver. Got a bit of a surprise with A.J. Green at number 2. I really, really like A.J. Green. I always have. And I've always thought he's been underappreciated because of the quarterback he has thrown in the ball. Rounding out my top 5, I have Julio Jones and Odell Beckham Jr. You can go either way with those, in my opinion. And number 5, I had Jordy Nelson.
That's a solid list.
What about yours?
Number 1, I have a surprise pick. I have Mike Evans. I think this is this is the year of the 2015 quarterback draft class. It might have been 2014. I might be confusing. I think Mariota and Winston both have a good year regardless. and I think Mike Evans profits from it. I think Mike Evans is the best fantasy wide receiver this year. He's been lurking. He's been in the top 3 in my league like the past 3 years. He's been trying to get up there. It's Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones getting his way. But this is his year. Then second is Antonio Brown, keeping it real. Then 3 is Odell Beckham Jr. 4, I also have AJ Green, who I really have a love for, even though he's a Bengal. I just think AJ Green is a fantastic wide receiver who's underrated. And then number 5 is my surprise pick. Everyone's screaming at me through the screen, where is Julio? And it's being written on my screen as well. But I have Michael Thomas on the Saints. I really, really like this guy. He was a rookie last year, and as soon as he got playing time, he started being fantastic. And I think since the Saints lost Brandon Cooks, this is the Saints' new number 1 wide receiver. And Drew Brees has been known to throw it. Even though they have a running back committee, I think Michael Thomas is going to fit number 5. And the reason why Julio Jones isn't in here, Julio Jones is fantastic. So why isn't he here? He gets hurt. He's hurt. He doesn't play anywhere close to 16 games a season, ever. It feels like he always has turf toe. He always just has a small injury. It hurts his reps, and he's slow. And I think that's going to affect him this year. I think he's going to be missing at least 3 games or something. He's already dealing with an injury this offseason. I've seen a report. It's not that he's a bad receiver. I think when he gets playing time, he's going to be one of the top ones, but he's just not going to play enough to be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver this year, in my opinion. But we're going to move along to the tight ends next. Who are your top 5 tight ends?
I have, in order, Rob Gronkowski, Jordan Reed, Jimmy Graham, Tyler Eifert, and Travis Kelce rounding out my top 5. So just quick commentary. We all know Gronkowski is probably the best all-around tight end in football, maybe in football history. His issues obviously staying on the field. Second, I have Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed has been a favorite of Kirk Cousins over the last couple of years, and I think that's going to continue to grow. I kind of want to flip-flop Tyler Eifert and Jimmy Graham. You know Graham is going to get his catches, and I think Eifert didn't have his best season last year, but he was also injured most of last season. 2 years ago, he had a fantastic season, and I was saying 2 years ago, I said this guy's going to be a huge performer for the Bengals, and he was. So I really like Tyler Eifert. And then at number 5, I know a lot of people have this guy at number 1, and I have a strong feeling you like this guy as well, is Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, Austin, maybe it's just because of that playoff game I remember us watching together back in January. I just think he's overrated, and I honestly don't think he's that good when people compare him to the other good tight ends in this league.
He was very salty after that loss to the Steelers.
He wasn't even good, though. He dropped several passes. He had several personal foul, well, not several, but he had one personal foul penalty that I remember sticking out. He wasn't good at all. He was supposed to be their best offensive player along with Tyreek Hill, and he was just garbage.
Mm-hmm. I still have Travis Kelce ranked number 1, only because they don't have another receiver besides Tyreek Hill. It's Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill show. I'm not a big fan of their running backs anymore. They used to be so much better. I don't know what happened, but now I feel like this team is a team that's going to be relying on the throwing just as much as they're going to be relying on running, which hasn't been the same in the past. They've been a very run-first team, in my opinion, because they never really had great wide receivers. But then number 2, I'm going to keep it at Rob Gronkowski. I think he's, for obvious reasons. The only reason I think he's not number 1 is because Tom Brady just has so many targets to throw to this year. It's just ridiculous. I think he's still going to be great because he's going to be number 2. But Brandon Cooks, not Mike Mitchell. I can't remember his name. He was a rookie last year. It's something Mitchell.
Oh, Brian Mitchell.
Yeah, that guy. And then Dwayne Allen, the backup tight end. They used Martellus Bennett like crazy last year. He's going to eat into his reps. Number 3, I have Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen has been a fantastic fantasy performer the past 5 years. He's been very consistent. He's been very good. Then number 4, I was just speaking about him a second ago, Martellus Bennett. Martellus Bennett is now with Aaron Rodgers, and I think that's almost as good as Tom Brady, and now he's the starter. So the full starter. I mean, he was a starter last year because Gronkowski fell down, but he's going to be starting from the beginning. And with Aaron Rodgers, I think he should be doing just as good like he did last year. And number 5, I'm rounding out with Tyler Eifert. I do like Eifert as well. I had him in fantasy 2 years ago when he was really good, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But all right, we're just going to do defenses. I think we're going to skip out on kickers because it's really hard to do. But well, who are your top 5 defenses?
This one was kind of tough because I was originally looking at just like sacks or just turnovers, and then I was like, well, how do I kind of quantify them and kind of, I don't know, how do I like make them kind of combine them? So I don't know, the way I see it is that the Texans are going to have the best defense in the league this year. They were already the number 1 ranked unit last year with without the best defensive player in the league in J.J. Watt, and they had something playing quarterback, and its name was Brock Osweiler, and he was not good at all. So there's a ton of reason for me to believe this unit could only get better, and that's why I have them at number 1. Following them, and yes, I have it in order, but it's no real particular order. I have the Denver Broncos, Seattle Seahawks, Arizona Cardinals, and New England Patriots. All those teams have had pretty good units over the last few years. Some of them specialize more in getting to the quarterback, like the Broncos and Von Miller. Others specialize in getting takeaways, like the Seahawks, and then some of them do it through not giving up points, like the Patriots. So I wanted my list to be a little bit of everything. What about you, Austin? What was your defensive listing looking like? Sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to give a disclaimer as well. I haven't done a normal defense league in about 3 years now, so it might be rough. I'm going to do my best here. Number 1, I had Kansas City, only because they are interception city. They led the league in interceptions last year. They're a pretty decent defense. I think that they could do it again for fantasy. Number 2, I agree with Texans. Texans are going to be not giving up a lot of points, in my opinion, with the return of J.J. Watt and stuff. They're also going to have a lot of sacks between J.J. Watt, Whitney Merciless, Jadeveon Clowney, all of those guys. Then at number 3, I have the Falcons. I don't know why. I just kind of had an intuition that the Falcons are going to be in there with new addition Don Terry Poe helping with things and stuff. And number 4 is Seattle. Seattle's always has been a hard defense for the past 5 years or so. They've been hanging around as one of the top defensive teams a while. And number 5, as I said earlier in this podcast, the Steelers are going to sneak into the top 5 defenses this year. I think it's going to be based on picks, and it's going to be on pass rush. I think they're going to get some sacks this year. Not number 1 sacks, but a lot. So moving along, we're going to talk about the sleepers and busts in this league. Let's start with sleepers. Who do you have as your NFL sleepers?
Well, this one was kind of tough because I guess one of them really isn't that big of a sleeper, and it's Spencer Ware, the running back of the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a pretty big breakout season last year as he stepped in for the injured Jamal Charles. I always liked him. He was a guy that was a pretty solid player at LSU, and he's someone that's got a bit of a pop to his carry, and I think he's a pretty solid all-around back. I don't know if he's going to be a huge performer, but I think he could be someone that don't be surprised if you see him score upwards of 7 touchdowns. The second guy I had was John Brown of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, obviously this is dependent on Carson Palmer, but with Michael Floyd gone now, this looks like, to me at least, it could be John Brown who maybe takes over the number 1 receiver spot over Larry Fitzgerald finally in Arizona. I don't know if it'll be this year or not, but Brown is a fantastic story. He's a great young talent, and I think that he offers a lot to Carson Palmer as a pass catcher, and I think that's something that we should all keep an eye on as the season progresses. I think he's a pretty good option if you ask me as far as a sleeper goes. Who are your sleepers, Austin?
My spot has been blown up. I don't know if I could even call these guys sleepers anymore. When I first went into the offseason, I had 2 names in mind after free agency, and number 1 was Ty Montgomery. I guess I thought I was slick, but as soon as fantasy season started rolling around, people were like, "Oh, these guys are fantasy sleepers." I am kind of moved my spot, but I still consider them sleepers. Ty Montgomery, I think, is going to be fantastic as a running back. From what he did at the end of the year, he's going to be a great pass catcher. I think he's going to be great at running back. He broke away from so many tackles. I got excited watching Green Bay games at the end of the year because of him. I thought he was really good in them. And then, like I said, Isaiah Crowell, I don't know how you say it.
It's Crowell.
Crowell, okay. He was decent last year. I don't remember exactly where he finished, but he started out really great and then kind of went down. This year, the Browns invested in offensive line and free agency. They picked up 2 great guys to help out on the offensive line, which will only make Crowell's job better. So I think he's going to be really good in fantasy this year. Sadly, I didn't get Crowell. I thought he would have lasted. I got Ty Montgomery in my one league, but I couldn't get Crowell. But moving on to busts, who are your busts for this year?
Number one, first and foremost, I'm going to get to this guy first. It's Sammy Watkins, the Bills' number 1 receiver. Look, when he's on the field, he's a talented guy. He can make some plays, but that's the thing. He's never on the field. He's always injured with something, and the Bills I believe they threw the least amount of touchdown passes last year. If not, they did in the AFC East for sure. The Bills are a running football team, so Watkins isn't going to get a ton of chances, and that coupled with his injury history is something to be concerned about for sure, so I'd stay away from him. The other bust I have is a little different. It's not like I'm expecting this guy is going to be completely useless, but Christian McCaffrey, I think, is being a little overhyped right now. He's doing some great things in camp, apparently, but I don't know. I don't love the Panthers' offensive line, and I feel like his numbers aren't going to be as strong as everyone was hoping. I think he's due somewhere around 700 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns if he's lucky. I don't know. I always thought he was kind of overrated, and I thought he was drafted too high. I mean, maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I think he's someone you kind of want to stay away from, especially since Cam Newton is a pretty good quarterback when it comes to running the ball himself. But that's just my opinion, of course. What are your opinions on the biggest busts this year in the NFL?
I'm going to start the one that's probably more expected, not really a bust, but Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray has been a consistently average player on fantasy. He's never been good. He's never been bad. He's just been average. He's been there. He's been there when you needed someone to start on a really bad bye week. This year, he's no longer with the Oakland Raiders offensive line. So he is with the Vikings line, which is very, very different and nowhere near as good as Oakland's was. So what I think is going to happen is he is going to do really bad this year. I think his career might be over after this. It's not going to completely come to an end, but I think he might not even be a Viking next year, depending, because I really think he was a product of Oakland's line, because he wasn't even that good. He was only average behind them. So he's going to be a big bust, especially with Dalvin Cook coming in there. And then number one, I'm sure if any listeners played fantasy, when we went through running backs, they're probably screaming at their screen that neither of us had J-Train in their top 5 fantasy running backs. I don't know why. There's no exact reason for me to think he's a bust, but Jordan Howard, I think he's going to be a bust this year. He did really well last year. I think it was a 1-year stint, and I think he's going to be awful this year. No, like I said, no real reason for it. I just think he's overhyped for whatever reason, and that's about it for me.
Alrighty. Well, that concludes our fantasy football podcast edition for the Pittsburgh Steelers and our own brief look at or I guess not so brief look at the rest of the NFL. Austin, the Steelers' first preseason game is a week away. When do you want to get a episode previewing that game?
Probably on the Wednesday before would be best, or Thursday late at night or in the morning, and then we'll have it in time for Friday. Or we could do it before the game on Friday. That works as well.
Yeah, I could probably do... I can't guarantee now. I'm starting a new job tomorrow, so I can't guarantee when I'll be free. But I think right now I should be free most of those times. So time will tell, but I'm pretty hopeful as of right now. So, all right, if you're all set to wrap things up for tonight, I am all set.
All right, I just have one more thing to add. just to let everyone know, I'll just be looking at August 14th. I am going to ESPN headquarters, and I'm going to be going on TV live for my fantasy league. I'm going to be posting pictures and things to our Twitter and Facebook accounts, hopefully just showing around the headquarters, cool things that are around. So just be on the lookout for those. John will be giving all our Twitter links in a second as he signs off. Just watch August 14th. Just watch out for all the pictures, because it's not very often that you could just get pictures from inside ESPN headquarters.
That is a Monday, correct?
That is a Monday.
Alrighty, send me whatever pictures or Instagram-worthy things you think could be posted, because I'll post there as well.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, so to wrap things up for today, if you have any questions about the show or you have any questions you want to ask us about the Steelers or about what we do here, which is just for fun, we wanted to remind you, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. You want to follow us on Twitter at @stronger_steel, Instagram stronger_steel_NFL, and on Facebook at Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Check out our website, which is strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Again, getting all those things going. Hopefully going to have a more revamped podcast, more complete show as we go forward into our first full season this year. So it's been a wild. What is it now? Coming up on 9 months now. It's been wild, but it's been a lot of fun, and we're hoping for bigger and better things as we approach our first full season, and that will kick off on Friday with the Steelers' first preseason game, traveling to New York to take on the New York Giants. But until then, Steeler Nation, stay classy, stay safe, and everyone have a fantastic night.